The stagecoach lurched violently as it struck another rut in the unforgiving terrain of the Wyoming Territory, sending Katherine Palmer jolting against the hard wooden seat. Spring of 1875 had brought unseasonable rains, turning the usually dusty trail into a treacherous ribbon of mud that snaked through the vast expanse of wilderness. Katherine pressed a handkerchief to her lips, suppressing both a cough and the rising tide of regret that threatened to overwhelm her. "You all right there, miss?" The grizzled man across from her peered from beneath the brim of his weathered hat, concern etching lines deeper into his sun-leathered face. "Yes, thank you," Katherine replied, though the hoarseness in her voice betrayed her. The truth was far from it. The persistent ache in her chest had grown worse over the 3-day journey, and the chill that ran through her body seemed impervious to the woolen shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The stagecoach driver's voice boomed from above. "Stillwater Creek coming up in an hour, folks." Last stop before Whitetail Ridge. Katherine clutched the worn letter in her pocket, her lifeline to a future she could scarcely imagine. Jacob Newell, her soon-to-be husband. A man she knew only through 5 exchanged letters, and a daguerreotype that showed a solemn-faced man with eyes that seemed to look right through her. A cattle rancher seeking a wife to help manage his home and, as he had written with surprising candor, to chase away the silence that has grown too loud to bear. She had responded to his advertisement in the Philadelphia Matrimonial Times with desperation born of necessity. After the devastating mill fire had claimed her parents and their modest home, Katherine had found herself alone at 22, with nothing but her mother's silver hairbrush, and a future that promised only drudgery as a seamstress in her cousin's overcrowded shop. Marriage to a stranger in the frontier had seemed like salvation then. Now, as fever burned through her veins and the vast, wild country stretched endlessly around her, doubt gnawed at her resolve. "Whitetail Ridge," the driver called out hours later, the words punctuated by the crack of his whip. End of the line. Katherine gathered her meager belongings, one trunk containing everything she owned in the world. The driver helped her down, her legs nearly buckling as they touched solid ground. The small settlement before her was nothing like she had imagined. A single dirt street lined with weathered wooden buildings, most appearing to have been hastily constructed and already surrendering to the elements. "Miss Palmer," a boy of perhaps 12 approached, cap in hand. "Mr. Newell sent me to fetch you. I'm Tommy. I help at his ranch sometimes." "Yes, that's me," Katherine smiled weakly. "Is Mr. Newell not here himself?" Tommy kicked at the dirt. "No, madam. There was trouble with rustlers at the north pasture. Said to tell you he's sorry and he'll be meeting you tomorrow instead. I'm to take you to Mrs. Wilkins' boarding house for the night." Disappointment mingled with relief. Perhaps a night's rest would restore her strength before she met her future husband. "I see. Thank you, Tommy." The boarding house was modest but clean, run by a plump widow with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "You're burning up, child," Mrs. Wilkins declared after one look at Katherine. "Let's get you to bed immediately." Katherine attempted to protest, but the room swam before her eyes, and she found herself being guided to a narrow bed in a corner room. "I'm fine, truly," she insisted, even as she sank gratefully onto the mattress. "Nonsense. You've got fever, plain as day." Mrs. Wilkins pressed a cool hand to Katherine's forehead. "I'll bring some willow bark tea. Rest now." But rest brought no relief. Through the night, Katherine's fever climbed higher, and by dawn she was delirious, her breathing labored, hair plastered to her sweat-soaked face. Through the haze of fever she heard urgent voices. Consumption, perhaps. "Can't stay here, my other boarders sent word to Newell, but he's not back yet. I'll take her." A new voice, deep and decisive. "My place is isolated, no risk to others." "But Mr. North, you haven't—" "I've nursed fever before, my mother, my wife." "Very well, if you're certain." "God knows nobody else will take her." Katherine felt herself being wrapped in blankets, lifted by strong arms. She tried to open her eyes, but the effort was too great. The sensation of movement, the creak of a wagon, the scent of leather and pine, then darkness claimed her again. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware occasionally of cool cloths on her forehead, of being helped to sip bitter-tasting brews, of a low voice murmuring words she couldn't quite grasp. Sometimes she thought she heard singing, low and rough but oddly comforting. Other times, there was only silence and the distant howl of coyotes. When Katherine finally opened her eyes with some clarity, sunlight was streaming through a window she didn't recognize. She lay in a bed with a patchwork quilt pulled up to her chin, in a room constructed of rough-hewn logs. A cabin, plainly furnished but meticulously neat. "You're awake." The voice came from a man sitting in a wooden chair near the hearth. He set aside a book and approached cautiously, as if afraid she might disappear. Katherine tried to speak, but her throat was parched. Immediately, he was beside her, helping her sit up slightly, holding a cup of water to her lips. "Thank you," she managed after a few sips. "Where am I? Who are you?" "My name is Jessie North. You're at my homestead, about 8 miles outside of Whitetail Ridge." He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His face was tanned from the sun, with lines at the corners of eyes that were a startling blue against his weathered skin. Not young, perhaps in his early 30s, but handsome in a rugged way that caught her breath. "How long have I been here?" 5 days. He returned to his chair, watching her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "The fever broke last night. Dr. Miller was here yesterday. Said you've got pneumonia, but you're fighting it well." 5 days. Katherine struggled to sit up further, panic rising. "But Mr. Newell knows where you are." Jessia's expression darkened slightly. "He's been informed." Something in his tone made Katherine pause. Has he come to visit?" Jessie hesitated. "No, he sent word that he'll come when you're recovered." A cold weight settled in Katherine's stomach, one that had nothing to do with her illness. "I see. You need rest," Jessie said abruptly, standing. "I've made some broth. Think you can manage some?" Katherine nodded, suddenly aware of a gnawing hunger. She watched as he moved efficiently around the cabin's small kitchen area, ladling steaming liquid from a pot hanging over the fire. There was a grace to his movements that belied his size. "You've been caring for me all this time?" she asked as he returned with the broth. "Someone had to." He helped her sit up properly, arranging pillows behind her back. "Town's too small for a proper hospital, and folks are scared of lung fever." "Why weren't you afraid?" His eyes met hers, then looked away. "I've seen enough of sickness to know when to fear it and when not to. Drink your broth." Katherine obeyed, finding the simple soup surprisingly flavorful. "It's good, thank you. My grandmother's recipe. She claimed it could raise the dead." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Never quite managed that, but it does seem to help the living." As strength gradually returned over the next days, Katherine learned more about her reluctant host. Jessie North had come to Wyoming Territory after the war between the states, where he'd fought for the Union. He'd built his cabin with his own hands, and now ran a modest horse breeding operation, specializing in sturdy, sure-footed mounts well suited to the challenging terrain. What he didn't volunteer, and Katherine was hesitant to ask, was why a man who clearly had skills and intelligence lived alone in such isolation, with only occasional trips to town for supplies. The cabin had 2 bedrooms. Katherine occupied one, while Jessie slept on a bedroll near the hearth, but there were signs that the second room had once been inhabited. A rocking chair with a faded cushion, a small vase that always contained fresh wildflowers, even when none bloomed nearby. On her 7th day at the cabin, Katherine felt strong enough to sit on the porch, wrapped in a quilt against the spring chill. From this vantage point, she could see the true beauty of Jessie's homestead, a small valley nestled between protective ridges, with a clear stream running through it and pine forests climbing the hillsides. His corral contained perhaps a dozen horses of varying colors, all with the same alert eyes and powerful builds. "They're beautiful," she commented when Jessie emerged from the barn, carrying a saddle in need of repair. He glanced at the horses, genuine pride crossing his face. "Best bloodlines I could find. That bay mare there, she's due to foal any day now." "Is this what you always wanted, to raise horses?" Jessie settled on the porch steps, pulling out a leather punch to work on the saddle. "No, once thought I'd be a doctor, even started studying before the war." His hands stilled momentarily. "Plans change." Yes, Katherine said softly. They do. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been troubling her. Have you heard anything more from Mr. Newell? Jesse's jaw tightened. He sent a boy yesterday with a note. Said he's been delayed with ranch business, will come when he can. Katherine fought against a wave of humiliation. I see. Man's a fool, Jesse muttered, punching a hole in the leather with more force than necessary. You know him well enough. His voice was clipped. Newell has the biggest spread in the county. Nearly 2,000 acres, 100 head of cattle at least, employs half a dozen men. You don't sound as though you approve. Jesse met her gaze directly. A man who'd leave his bride to be sick without so much as showing his face. No, I don't much approve of that. Katherine looked away, blinking back sudden tears. Perhaps he's reconsidered. I wouldn't blame him. He didn't bargain for a wife with weak lungs. There's nothing weak about you, Katherine Palmer. The intensity in Jesse's voice made her look up in surprise. You fought through a fever that would have killed most, and you did it with more grace than many show in perfect health. It was the most he'd said to her at once, and the unexpected praise brought color to her cheeks. Thank you for saying so, and for everything you've done. I don't know how to repay your kindness. No need. He returned his attention to the saddle. Any decent person would have done the same. I don't believe that's true, but I'm grateful nonetheless. Katherine pulled the quilt tighter around her shoulders. I should try to send word to Mr. Newell myself. I can't impose on you indefinitely. Jesse's hands stilled again. You're not imposing, and you still need time to heal properly. He glanced at the sky where clouds were gathering. Storm's coming, we should head inside. As if his words had summoned it, a low rumble of thunder sounded in the distance. Jesse helped Katherine to her feet, his hand steady under her elbow. The brief contact sent an unexpected warmth through her that had nothing to do with fever. The storm arrived with sudden fury, rain lashing against the windows and wind howling around the cabin's sturdy walls. Jesse built up the fire, and the interior of the cabin became a haven of warmth and light against nature's onslaught outside. Katherine sat at the small table, watching as Jesse prepared a simple supper of beans, cornbread, and dried apple slices reconstituted in cinnamon water. There was something mesmerizing about his efficient movements, the quiet competence with which he managed every task. Where did you learn to cook? She asked as he set a plate before her. Necessity. He took the seat across from her. My mother taught me basics. Army taught me to make do with whatever was available. Rest came from trial and error, mostly error at first. Katherine smiled. You're quite accomplished now. Food's just fuel. But a pleased expression crossed his face nonetheless. Though I admit it's nice cooking for someone besides myself for a change. After supper, Jesse surprised her by retrieving a worn volume of poetry from a small bookshelf. Thought you might enjoy this, better than staring at the walls. Katherine accepted the book, touched by his thoughtfulness. Wordsworth, one of my favorites. Mine too. He seemed almost embarrassed by the admission. My wife, he stopped abruptly. You were married. Katherine prompted gently after a moment. Jesse nodded, his gaze fixed on the fire. Her name was Sarah. She died 6 years ago, childbirth, baby too. I'm so sorry. Katherine's heart ached at the raw pain still evident in his voice. It was a long time ago. He stood abruptly. I should check on the horses. Storm makes them nervous. Before she could respond, he had grabbed his coat and hat and was gone, the door closing firmly behind him. Katherine sat with the book in her lap, understanding now the source of the sadness she'd sometimes glimpsed in his eyes, the reason for the always fresh flowers in the unused bedroom. Jesse returned an hour later, soaked to the skin despite his coat. Katherine had prepared tea, remembering where he kept the mint leaves and honey. The horses are fine, he reported, hanging his dripping coat by the door, though that bay mare's getting restless, might be her time soon. I made tea, Katherine offered, holding out a steaming mug, to warm you. He accepted it with surprise. Thank you. They sat in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackling of the fire and the persistent drumming of rain on the roof. Eventually, Katherine gathered her courage. Jesse, about your wife, I'm truly sorry for bringing up painful memories. He studied his tea for a long moment. Not your fault. Some days it's easier to speak of her than others. He took a deep breath. After they died, I couldn't see the point in much of anything anymore, gave up my medical studies, came out here where nobody knew me. Built this place with my own hands, thinking the physical labor would. I don't know, make me forget, maybe. Did it help? A sad smile touched his lips. No, but it gave me something to do with my hands while my heart figured out how to keep beating. He looked up at her. What about you? What brought you to answer an advertisement from a man you'd never met? Katherine told him about the fire, about her parents, about the bleak prospects she'd faced in Philadelphia. It seemed like Providence when I saw Mr. Newell's advertisement. He wrote so eloquently about this beautiful country, about building a life together. She gave a self-deprecating laugh. I suppose I was naive, not naive, hopeful. There's a difference. Jessica's eyes held hers. Hope's never foolish, Katherine, even when it leads you down unexpected paths. The following morning dawned clear, the storm having washed the world clean. Katherine woke to the sound of Jessica's voice raised in urgency from the direction of the barn. Moving as quickly as her still weak body allowed, she dressed and made her way outside. She found Jessie in the corral, kneeling beside the bay mare who lay on her side, sides heaving. What's happening? Katherine asked, approaching the fence. Jessie glanced up, worry etched on his face. The foal's coming, but something's wrong. She's been laboring for hours with no progress. Katherine hesitated only a moment before lifting her skirts and climbing through the fence rails. How can I help? You should be resting. I've helped birth calves before, she interrupted. My uncle had a farm in Pennsylvania. Tell me what you need. Relief flashed in his eyes. Water. Clean cloths. There's a birthing kit in the barn leather case on the wall by the door. Katherine moved as quickly as she could, gathering the requested items. When she returned, Jessie was speaking soothingly to the mare, stroking her neck as she trembled with effort. The foal's turned wrong, he explained as Katherine knelt beside him. I'll have to reach in and try to reposition it. Can you keep her head steady? Talk to her, keep her calm if you can. Katherine moved to the mare's head, gently stroking between her eyes and murmuring reassurances. The horse's dark eyes rolled in fear and pain, but she seemed to respond to the gentle touch. What followed was a tense hour of careful work. Jessica's face set in concentration as he attempted to save both mare and foal. Katherine did what she could, offering water, passing implements from the birthing kit, continuing to soothe the distressed animal. Despite her lingering weakness, she found strength in the urgency of the moment. Finally, with a slick rush of fluid, the foal emerged spindly-legged, wet, and wonderfully alive. The mare struggled to her feet almost immediately, turning to nuzzle her newborn as it lay blinking in the morning sunlight. A filly, Jessie announced, sitting back on his heels, exhaustion and triumph mingling on his face. And a fighter from the looks of her. Katherine couldn't help but smile at the tiny creature already attempting to coordinate its gangly legs. She's beautiful. Jessie looked at her, something new in his expression. You were amazing. Most people would have stayed clear of the mess. Most people haven't seen the miracle of new life before. Katherine watched as the foal finally achieved a wobbling stance, taking its first tentative steps toward its mother. There's nothing quite like it. They cleaned up together, working in companionable silence. Katherine found herself acutely aware of Jessica's presence, the way he moved, the occasional brush of his hand against hers, the quiet strength he exuded. When had this awareness begun? She couldn't pinpoint the moment, only knew that it was growing stronger by the day. Back at the cabin, Jessie insisted Katherine rest while he prepared breakfast. She protested only mildly, recognizing that the morning's exertions had indeed depleted her recovering strength. What will you name her? Katherine asked as they ate. The filly, Jessie considered. Haven't thought about it. You should name her Hope, Katherine suggested, because she fought so hard to enter this world. A slow smile spread across Jessica's face. Hope, yes, that fits her perfectly. The day passed peacefully, with Katherine resting and Jessie tending to his chores, checking frequently on mare and foal. By evening, Katherine felt strong enough to help prepare supper, working alongside Jessie in the small kitchen area. I received a letter today, Jessie said as they ate. His voice was carefully neutral. From Jacob Newell. Catherine's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Oh, he's coming tomorrow to see you. Jessie wouldn't meet her eyes. Says he's sorry for the delay. I see. A confusing mix of emotions swirled through Catherine: anxiety, resignation, and oddly, disappointment. That's good news, I suppose. Is it? Now Jessie did look at her, his blue eyes intense. Catherine set down her fork. I came here to marry him, Jessie. I gave my word. To a man who hasn't bothered to visit once while you were ill. Perhaps he had good reasons. Perhaps, Jessie's voice was tight, or perhaps he's not worthy of you. The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither was ready to acknowledge. Catherine looked away first. It's not a question of worth, it's a matter of commitment, of honor. And if your heart's not in it, what honor is there in that? My heart has little to do with it. This is about survival, about security. Catherine stood, needing distance from the table from him. Not all of us have the luxury of following our hearts, Jessie. He rose as well, his height making the cabin suddenly seem smaller. Is that what you think I did? Followed my heart to this isolated spot, chose this lonely existence? I don't know what you chose because you reveal so little of yourself. The words burst from her with unexpected heat. You've saved my life, shown me kindness I can never repay, but you remain a mystery. One moment open, the next closed like a book slammed shut, and you're so forthcoming. Jessie's voice rose to match hers. You speak of commitment and honor, but I've seen how you look at this place at— He stopped abruptly. At what? Catherine challenged, stepping closer. The tension between them stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Jessie's shoulders slumped. It doesn't matter. Newell will be here tomorrow. You'll go with him, start the life you came here for. He moved toward the door. I need some air. Once again, Catherine found herself alone in the cabin, heart racing, confused by the intensity of emotions Jessie North evoked in her. How had this happened? In just 2 weeks, this place, this man, had come to feel more like home than anywhere she'd been since her parents died. The prospect of leaving tomorrow filled her with a hollow ache she hadn't anticipated. She was still awake when Jessie returned hours later, though she pretended sleep. Through barely opened eyes, she watched him move quietly around the cabin, banking the fire, removing his boots. In the dim light, his expression was unreadable, but the careful way he glanced toward her bedroom door spoke of concern, of care. Morning arrived too quickly. Catherine dressed in her best gown, the blue cotton she'd saved for her first meeting with Jacob Newell. It felt strange to be wearing it now, 2 weeks later than planned, and for a man who remained a stranger despite their correspondence. Jessie was already up, his bedroll neatly stowed, coffee brewing on the stove. He nodded a greeting but said little as they shared a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush with dried berries. Your cough is almost gone, he noted as she cleared the dishes. That's good. Yes, thanks to your care. Catherine busied her hands with the washing up, avoiding his gaze. I never would have recovered so quickly without your knowledge of healing. Anyone would have. Please don't say anyone would have done the same, Catherine interrupted, turning to face him. We both know that's not true. You saved my life, Jessie North. I won't forget that. He opened his mouth as if to respond, then closed it again as the sound of an approaching wagon reached them. He's here, Jessie said flatly. Catherine dried her hands on her apron, then removed it, smoothing her dress nervously. How do I look? Jessie's gaze traveled slowly over her, from the simple arrangement of her hair to the modest cut of her dress. Beautiful, he said simply, then turned away. I'll greet him. Catherine remained inside, heart pounding, listening to the murmur of male voices outside. After what seemed an eternity, there was a knock at the door. Jacob Newell was exactly as his daguerreotype had portrayed him, tall, with broad shoulders and a carefully trimmed beard. His clothes were well made, his boots polished to a shine. He removed his hat as he entered, revealing hair the color of wheat just beginning to silver at the temples. Miss Palmer, he said, his voice deeper than she had imagined from his letters. I cannot express my regret at not coming sooner. Please accept my most sincere apologies. Mr. Newell. Catherine managed a smile, extending her hand. I understand you had pressing matters at your ranch. He took her hand, holding it perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Nothing should have taken precedence over your welfare. I am deeply sorry." From the corner of her eye, Katherine saw Jesse step back outside, closing the door quietly behind him. "Mr. North has been most kind," she said, withdrawing her hand. "I owe him my life." "Yes, so I understand." Something flickered in Jacob Newell's expression, discomfort, perhaps. "A fortunate circumstance that he was willing to help. I've settled his fee, of course." "Fee?" Katherine frowned. "What fee? For your care. Quite reasonable, all things considered." Jacob glanced around the cabin with barely disguised disdain. "Are you well enough to travel?" "My home is far more comfortable than these rustic accommodations." Katherine felt a surge of indignation on Jesse's behalf. "Mr. North never mentioned any payment, and his home may be simple, but it has everything one needs." Jacob's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed." "Well, perhaps we should discuss this further at my ranch. I've brought the wagon, and Mrs. Rivera, my housekeeper, has prepared a room for you. Once you're fully recovered, we can proceed with our original arrangement." The coolness of his tone, the businesslike manner, it was all so different from what Katherine had expected based on his letters. She hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "Mr. Newell, perhaps we should take some time to become better acquainted before finalizing any arrangements. Much has happened since we last corresponded." A slight frown creased his brow. "I was under the impression our agreement was settled. You've traveled a considerable distance at my expense, Miss Palmer." "Yes, but if you're concerned about your illness affecting our arrangement, let me assure you it does not. I am still prepared to honor our agreement." How generous, Katherine thought with unexpected bitterness. Aloud, she said, "That's most kind of you, Mr. Newell. However, I believe we both deserve the opportunity to be certain of our decision." Jacob studied her for a moment, then nodded stiffly. "As you wish. Shall we say 2 weeks? That should provide ample time for your complete recovery and for us to become better acquainted." "That seems reasonable." Katherine glanced toward the window where she could see Jesse by the corral, his back to the cabin. "I should thank Mr. North before we depart, of course." Jacob replaced his hat. "I'll wait by the wagon." Once he had left, Katherine gathered her few belongings, moving mechanically around the room that had been hers these past weeks. She found herself lingering, touching the patchwork quilt, looking out at the view of mountains and pine trees that had greeted her each morning. Finally, she stepped outside. Jesse was still by the corral, now crouched beside the new foal, checking its spindly legs. He stood as Katherine approached. "You're leaving, then," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Yes." Katherine clutched her small carpet bag. "Mr. Newell has offered his home while I recover fully. Then we'll see." Jesse nodded, his eyes unreadable. "I'm glad you're well enough to travel. Thanks to you." Katherine swallowed against the tightness in her throat. "Jesse, Mr. Newell mentioned that he paid you for my care." "Is that true?" A muscle ticked in Jesse's jaw. "He insisted, said he wouldn't be beholden to me." "And you accepted?" "I took the money." Jesse's gaze was steady. "And I'll use it to buy supplies for the orphanage in Whitetail Ridge. Those children need it more than I do." Relief washed through Katherine. "I knew you wouldn't." She stopped, realizing how presumptuous she sounded. "That is, it's very generous of you." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. "I should go," Katherine finally said. "Mr. Newell is waiting." Jesse nodded again, his posture stiff. "Be well, Katherine Palmer, and you, Jesse North." She hesitated, then impulsively held out her hand. "Thank you for everything." He took her hand in his, calloused fingers closing gently around hers. For a brief moment, something unspoken passed between them, regret, longing, possibilities unrealized. Then he released her, stepping back. "Goodbye, Katherine." She turned away quickly, not wanting him to see the tears threatening to spill. Jacob Newell was waiting by his wagon, watching their exchange with an unreadable expression. He helped Katherine up to the seat with formal courtesy, then climbed up beside her. As the wagon pulled away, Katherine allowed herself one backward glance. Jesse still stood by the corral, a solitary figure against the backdrop of mountains and sky, watching them go. The image seared itself into her memory, a moment she knew instinctively she would revisit often in the days and weeks to come. The Newell Ranch was indeed impressive, a sprawling two-story house built of sturdy timber, with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides and glass windows that must have cost a small fortune to transport from the east. Outbuildings dotted the property, and cattle grazed on rolling pastureland that stretched to distant hills. Mrs. Rivera, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, showed Katherine to a comfortable bedroom with actual papered walls and a feather mattress. The luxury felt strange after the simple functionality of Jessia's cabin. "Supper at 6, Mrs. Rivera informed her. "Mr. Newell dines promptly." Left alone, Katherine unpacked her meager belongings, feeling oddly out of place among the fine furnishings. A small writing desk by the window held paper, pen, and ink, an unexpectedly thoughtful touch. She sat down, intending to compose a proper thank-you note to Jessie, but found herself staring at the blank page, unable to find words adequate to express what she felt. The days that followed established a pattern. Jacob was unfailingly polite, showing Katherine his property, explaining his business dealings, introducing her to his employees. He was clearly proud of what he had built, and with good reason. The Newell Ranch was the most prosperous in the region, its owner respected and influential. Yet Katherine found herself struggling to feel the connection she had hoped for. Jacob was courteous but reserved, keeping a careful distance both physically and emotionally. Their conversations remained superficial, whether local gossip, books they had read. When Katherine attempted to probe deeper, asking about his past, his dreams for the future, he deflected with practiced ease. "I've always been a practical man, Miss Palmer," he said one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. "Dreams and sentiments are luxuries in a place like this. What matters are tangible results: land, cattle, buildings, things you can touch and count." "Surely there must be more to life than possessions," Katherine ventured. "What a family of love." A shadow crossed Jacob's face. "I had a family once, a wife, a son. Yellow fever took them 15 years ago in St. Louis. I came west afterward, determined to build something lasting." He looked out over his property. "This is my legacy now." Katherine felt a surge of sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Newell, truly." He acknowledged her words with a nod, but didn't pursue the conversation further. It was the most personal information he had shared with her, yet he had related it as one might describe a business transaction gone wrong factually, without visible emotion. A week into her stay, Katherine's health was fully restored, her strength returned. She found herself helping Mrs. Rivera with household tasks, partly out of boredom and partly from a desire to feel useful. The housekeeper was initially resistant, but gradually warmed to Katherine's genuine interest in learning the workings of the ranch house. "Mr. Newell likes everything just so," Mrs. Rivera explained as they folded freshly laundered linens. "Same schedule every day. Breakfast at 7, dinner at noon, supper at 6. He doesn't like surprises or changes." "Has he always been so structured?" Katherine asked. Mrs. Rivera considered the question. "Since I've known him, yes. 8 years now. He's a fair employer, pays well, expects much." She gave Katherine an appraising look. "He needs a wife with a steady temperament, no flights of fancy or emotional displays." "I see." Katherine smoothed a pillowcase, wondering if Mrs. Rivera was attempting to warn her or advise her. "And you think I might suit?" "That's for you and Mr. Newell to decide." The housekeeper's expression softened slightly. "But I will say this, he's been different since you arrived, watches the clock less, even smiled yesterday when you were reading to him." It was true that Jacob seemed to enjoy their evening ritual, where Katherine read aloud from various books in his library while he smoked his pipe. It was their most comfortable time together, the formality between them easing somewhat in the shared appreciation of literature. Yet Katherine couldn't ignore the growing realization that something essential was missing. There was no spark between them, no sense of connection beyond their mutual need, his for a competent household manager, hers for security and a home. Was that enough for a lifetime together? Once she might have thought so. Now, having glimpsed something different, she wasn't certain, and always her thoughts returned to Jesse North, to his quiet strength, his unexpected gentleness, the rare but transformative smile that reached his eyes. To conversations that flowed naturally, to comfortable silences, to the feeling of rightness she had experienced in his simple cabin. On the 10th day of her stay, Katherine rode with Jacob to Whitetail Ridge for supplies. The small town was busier than she remembered, with several wagons parked outside the general store and people moving purposefully along the single street. Monthly supply day, Jacob explained as he helped her down from the wagon. Folks come from outlying homesteads. I have business at the bank. Perhaps you'd like to browse the store while you wait, Katherine agreed, glad for the opportunity to explore the town properly. The general store was crowded but well stocked, offering everything from foodstuffs to fabric to farming implements. She was examining a display of hair ribbons when a familiar voice reached her. 2 pounds of coffee, please, and whatever candy you recommend for children. Jesse stood at the counter, his back to her. He looked different, his hair trimmed neatly, his shirt newer than those he'd worn at the cabin. The storekeeper was weighing coffee beans while chattering about the merits of peppermint sticks versus horehound drops. Katherine hesitated, suddenly unsure. Should she approach him? What would she say? Before she could decide, Jesse turned, purchases in hand, and saw her. For a moment neither spoke, then Jesse nodded politely. Miss Palmer, you're looking well. Thank you, Mr. North. The formality between them felt wrong, but Katherine maintained it. I am fully recovered thanks to your care. I'm glad to hear it. His eyes searched hers briefly. And how do you find life at the Newell Ranch? It's very comfortable. Katherine twisted her hands together. Mr. Newell has been most accommodating. Jesse's expression revealed nothing. Good, that's good. He glanced toward the door. If you'll excuse me, I have deliveries to make. Of course. Katherine stepped aside, disappointment washing through her. It was good to see you, Mr. North. He paused, something unspoken in his eyes. And you, Miss Palmer. Then he was gone, striding out of the store with the easy grace she remembered. Katherine remained where she was, heart racing inexplicably. It was only when the storekeeper addressed her directly that she realized she had been staring after Jesse for an embarrassingly long time. Can I help you find something, miss? No, thank you. I'm just looking. Katherine moved away from the counter, pretending interest in a display of canned goods while she composed herself. Through the window, she could see Jesse loading his purchases into a wagon. A small figure darted up to him, a girl of perhaps 8 or 9, with dark braids and a patched dress. Jesse crouched to her level, saying something that made the child laugh. Then he reached into his pocket and handed her what appeared to be a candy stick, ruffling her hair affectionately before she ran off. The scene stirred something in Katherine's chest, a longing, an ache for possibilities she had never fully considered before coming west. Children, a family of her own, a husband who would crouch down to speak to a child at her level and carry candy in his pockets just in case. Jacob Newell had never mentioned children in his letters or conversations. His house, for all its size and comfort, had no nursery, no evidence that he envisioned a family beyond a wife to manage his household. Perhaps, given his loss, he didn't wish to risk such pain again. Katherine couldn't fault him for that, but she suddenly realized how much she had always assumed children would be part of her future. There you are. Jacob's voice startled her from her thoughts. Find anything of interest, just browsing. Katherine turned from the window. Are you finished at the bank? Yes, and I've arranged a surprise. There was unusual animation in Jacob's face. Reverend Mills is available this Sunday to perform our wedding ceremony if you're agreeable. Katherine stared at him, caught completely off guard. This Sunday. But that's only 3 days away. Indeed, I see no reason to delay further. You're fully recovered, we've had our time of acquaintance, and frankly, the gossips are beginning to speculate about your continued presence in my home without benefit of matrimony. Jacob's tone was matter of fact. Unless you have objections, Katherine struggled to organize her thoughts. Everything was moving too quickly. I thought we agreed on 2 weeks of acquaintance before making our decision. Has something occurred to make you doubt our arrangement? Jacob's eyes narrowed slightly. Or perhaps someone, the emphasis he placed on the word made it clear he had noticed her interaction with Jesse. Heat rose to Katherine's cheeks. Of course not. I simply believe such an important decision deserves proper consideration. Jacob studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, we'll keep to our original timeline, 4 more days. His tone made it clear he expected her decision to be favorable. Shall we return to the ranch? Mrs. Rivera is preparing a special supper tonight. The ride back was conducted mostly in silence, Katherine's mind whirling with conflicting emotions. Marriage to Jacob Newell offered everything she had come west seeking: security, comfort, a respectable position in the community. He was not unkind, merely reserved. Many marriages were built on less. Yet the thought of committing her life to him in just a few days filled her with dread rather than anticipation. And the brief encounter with Jesse had only intensified her confusion. That evening, Katherine excused herself early, claiming fatigue. In the privacy of her room, she sat at the writing desk, finally composing the thank you note she had been avoiding. But as pen touched paper, what emerged was not a polite expression of gratitude, but something far more revealing. Dear Jesse, seeing you today reminded me of all I have not properly expressed. Your kindness during my illness went far beyond duty or obligation. You opened your home to a stranger, risked your own health to nurse me, and asked nothing in return. But more than that, you showed me what it means to truly see another person. In your cabin, despite my illness and uncertainty, I felt truly seen for perhaps the first time in my life. Our conversations, brief though they sometimes were, touched me in ways I find difficult to articulate. I do not know what path my life will take in the coming days. The decision before me is not simple, though perhaps it should be. What I do know is that whatever happens, I will carry the memory of those days in your cabin as something precious and true, with deepest gratitude and more feelings than I dare express. Katherine, she stared at the words she had written, shocked by their honesty. This was not a note she could send, revealing as it did emotions she had barely acknowledged to herself. With trembling hands, she folded the paper and locked it in the small drawer of the writing desk, where it would remain her secret. The following morning, a commotion in the yard drew Katherine to her window. Several ranch hands were gathered around a horse and rider who had apparently just arrived at speed. The rider, a young man Katherine recognized as one of Jacob's workers, was gesturing urgently. Katherine dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where she found Jacob in the foyer pulling on his coat. "What's happening?" she asked. "Cattle rustlers hit the north pasture last night," he replied grimly. "Took nearly 30 head. I'm riding out with the men to see if we can pick up their trail." "Is that safe?" Katherine couldn't hide her concern. "Shouldn't you notify the sheriff? Already sent word, but he's a day's ride away. We can't wait." Jacob checked his pistol before holstering it. "I'll likely be gone overnight." "Mrs. Rivera will attend to your needs. Of course, please be careful." He paused, seeming to notice her genuine concern. His expression softened slightly. "I will, and Katherine, I hope you'll have an answer for me when I return." Before she could respond, he was gone, striding purposefully toward the waiting men. Minutes later, the group rode out, dust rising from beneath their horses' hooves. Left to her own devices, Katherine spent the morning helping Mrs. Rivera with household tasks. The housekeeper was unusually talkative, perhaps sensing Katherine's unsettled state. "First time the rustlers have come so close to the main house," she commented as they worked. "Getting bolder, those men. Has this happened often? 3 times this year already." "Mr. Newell thinks it's the same gang, moving through different territories." Mrs. Rivera shook her head disapprovingly. "The laws stretched thin out here, not enough sheriffs to cover the ground. It seems dangerous work, ranching." Katherine measured flour for bread, trying to sound casual. "Do you know if Mr. North has had similar troubles with his horses?" Mrs. Rivera gave her a knowing look. "Jesse North keeps to himself mostly, but his horses are valuable, especially those new foals with the Arabian bloodlines. I'd be surprised if rustlers haven't tried." Katherine kneaded the dough with perhaps more vigor than necessary. "He seems capable of defending what's his. That he is." Mrs. Rivera's tone turned thoughtful. "Lost a lot, that man. His wife, the baby, his plans to be a doctor, then his parents within a year of each other." Would have broken most men. But North, he just keeps going, keeps helping others too, though he doesn't like folks knowing about that. Helping how? Katherine couldn't resist asking. Tends to sick folks who can't pay for a proper doctor. Looks after those orphans at the mission school, brings supplies, helps repair the building. Last winter, when the Carson family's place burned down, he took them in until they could rebuild. The housekeeper paused in her work. Not a man who seeks recognition, but one who deserves it nonetheless. Katherine absorbed this information, a warm glow expanding in her chest. It confirmed what she had sensed about Jesse, his fundamental goodness, his quiet generosity. And Mr. Newell, she ventured. Does he also involve himself in community matters? Mrs. Rivera's expression grew guarded. Mr. Newell contributes financially to worthy causes. He's a businessman, not a hands-on helper like North. Different men, different ways. The afternoon stretched long before her. With Jacob and most of the ranch hands gone, an unusual quiet had settled over the property. Katherine found herself restless, unable to concentrate on reading or sewing. Finally, she approached Mrs. Rivera with a request. Is there a horse I might borrow for a short ride? I find I need some fresh air and exercise. The housekeeper looked doubtful. Mr. Newell doesn't keep riding horses for ladies. His late wife never learned to ride. I can manage a gentle gelding, Katherine assured her. I'm not inexperienced, after some persuasion, Mrs. Rivera directed Katherine to the stable boy, who saddled a placid chestnut gelding used occasionally for visitors. Don't go far, the boy warned as he helped Katherine mount. Storm brewing to the west. Katherine promised to stay within sight of the ranch buildings. But once out of view, she turned the horse toward the road, a plan forming in her mind. She told herself she merely wished to see how the new foal was faring, perhaps thank Jesse properly for his care. The lie felt transparent even to herself, but she urged the horse forward nonetheless. The ride to Jesse's homestead took longer than she had expected. Clouds gathered overhead, and the air grew heavy with impending rain. By the time the familiar cabin came into view, the first fat droplets were beginning to fall. Katherine hesitated at the edge of the property, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing here, unannounced and uninvited? What would Jesse think of her impropriety? What did she hope to accomplish? Before she could retreat, Jesse emerged from the barn, alerted perhaps by the sound of her approach. He froze when he saw her, disbelief evident even at a distance. Katherine, he strode toward her as the rain began to fall in earnest. What are you doing here? Is something wrong? No, she was suddenly at a loss for words. I wanted to see how the foal was doing. Jesse's expression suggested he didn't believe this for a moment, but he didn't challenge her. You're getting soaked. Come inside. He helped her dismount, then quickly led both her and the horse to the barn. Inside, he efficiently unsaddled the gelding and settled it in an empty stall with hay and water. All the while, Katherine stood dripping on the packed earth floor, aware of how impulsive and foolish her action must seem. The foal is fine, Jesse finally said, turning to face her. Growing stronger every day. I'm glad to hear it. Katherine twisted her hands together. Jesse, let's get you inside. He cut her off, nodding toward the cabin. You're shivering. The cabin was exactly as she remembered it, neat, simple, welcoming in its unpretentious comfort. Jesse built up the fire quickly, then fetched a towel for her wet hair and a blanket for her shoulders. You shouldn't have come, he said once she was settled in the chair by the fire. Not alone, not with a storm coming. I know. Katherine stared into the flames. It was impulsive. Newell know where you are, she shook her head. He's gone after cattle rustlers, won't be back until tomorrow. Jesse's expression darkened. So you're alone at his ranch. Mrs. Rivera is there and some of the hands. Katherine looked up at him. I was perfectly safe. Until you decided to ride out alone with a storm approaching. There was an edge to Jesse's voice she hadn't heard before. What were you thinking, Katherine? I was thinking I needed to see you, she admitted, the words escaping before she could reconsider. To talk to you, Jesse went still. About what? Katherine took a deep breath. Jacob has asked me to marry him this Sunday. A muscle ticked in Jesse's jaw. I see, congratulations. I haven't given him my answer yet. Why not? Jesse's voice was carefully neutral. Isn't this what you came west for, to be his wife? Yes, no. I don't know anymore. Katherine stood, unable to remain still. When I answered his advertisement, I thought I knew what I wanted: security, a home, a respectable position. Jacob Newell offers all of those things. But in these past weeks, I've begun to wonder if there might be more to life than security alone. She turned to face him. If perhaps there might be something else worth considering. Jesse's expression gave nothing away, such as connection, understanding, joy. Katherine took a step toward him. The feeling that someone truly sees you, knows you, and values what they see. Katherine, when I was ill, you could have left me at the boarding house or with any of a dozen families in town, but you brought me here to your home. You nursed me back to health with such care and attention. You talked to me, really talked to me about things that matter. The words tumbled out now, unstoppable. And when I'm with you, I feel alive in a way I never have before. Jesse's facade finally cracked, revealing a vulnerability that took her breath away. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to marry Jacob Newell. Katherine's voice steadied with conviction. I'm saying that in just 2 weeks of knowing you, I've felt more connection, more rightness than in all the letters I exchanged with him. You barely know me, Jesse protested, but he had moved closer, drawn as if by an invisible force. I know enough, Katherine whispered. I know you're kind and honorable. I know you help others without seeking recognition. I know you keep fresh flowers in your wife's room even years after her death, because love like that doesn't simply disappear. Jesse's breath caught audibly. Katherine, think about what you're risking. Newell can give you a life of comfort, of stability. And what can you offer? The question was genuine, not challenging. Jesse looked around the simple cabin, then back at her. Not much. This place, myself, a life that will never be easy, but one I promise would be honest and true. That's all I want. Katherine closed the remaining distance between them, her hand reaching up to touch his face. That's everything. For a moment, Jesse remained perfectly still beneath her touch. Then, with a sound somewhere between surrender and joy, he pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers with an intensity that left no doubt about the depth of his feelings. The kiss was everything Katherine had never known to hope for, tender yet passionate, a promise and a claiming all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since the day your fever broke and you looked at me with those clear eyes, he confessed. But you were promised to another man, and I wouldn't dishonor you or myself by interfering. And now, Katherine's fingers traced the strong line of his jaw, now I find I'm not nearly as honorable as I thought. His smile was rueful, but his eyes were alight with happiness. Because all I can think is that I want you to stay, here, with me. Then ask me, she whispered. Jesse took her hands in his gaze never leaving hers. Katherine Palmer, will you stay? Will you build a life with me here in this imperfect place? Will you be my wife, not because you need security or because I need a housekeeper, but because somehow, against all odds, we've found something rare and precious between us? Yes, the word was simple but filled with certainty. Yes to all of it. Outside, the storm raged on, rain lashing against the windows and thunder rumbling across the valley. Inside, in the warm circle of firelight, Katherine and Jesse began to plan a future neither had imagined just weeks before. I need to speak with Jacob, Katherine said eventually, reluctance in her voice. To explain, he deserves that much. Jesse nodded, his expression serious. Tomorrow, when the storm passes, I'll ride with you to the edge of his property, but this is something you should do alone. He'll be angry, hurt, perhaps, probably both. But you're not legally bound to him, Katherine. You have the right to change your mind. They talked long into the evening, sharing hopes and plans, filling in the gaps of their brief but intense acquaintance. Jesse spoke of his childhood in Ohio, his medical studies interrupted by war, the joy he had found with Sarah, and the devastating loss that followed. Katherine told him about her parents, the fire that had claimed them, and her previous life, her journey west. When weariness finally overtook them, Jesse insisted Katherine take the bedroom while he made his customary bed near the hearth. We may be decided in our hearts, he said with a smile that made her blush, "but we'll do things properly until the proper time." Morning brought clear skies and a renewed sense of purpose. After a simple breakfast, they rode together toward the Newell ranch, Katherine on the borrowed gelding, Jesse on his favorite roan stallion. They stopped at the boundary marked by a split-rail fence. "I'll wait here," Jesse said, his expression concerned. "If you're not back in 2 hours, I'll come looking for you." Katherine nodded, suddenly nervous. "I'll be as quick and kind as I can. Just be honest. That's all anyone can ask." Jesse leaned over to squeeze her hand. "Remember, whatever happens, we face it together from now on." With those words bolstering her courage, Katherine rode the final distance to the Newell ranch alone. The property was alive with activity, men on horseback coming and going, shouts and the lowing of cattle filling the air. It appeared Jacob had recovered his stolen stock. Mrs. Rivera met her at the door, relief and suspicion warring in her expression. "Where have you been? We were worried sick when the storm came and you hadn't returned." "I'm sorry for causing concern," Katherine said sincerely. "Is Mr. Newell available? I need to speak with him urgently, in his study. He's in a foul mood. They caught the rustlers but had to shoot one. Sheriff's with him now." Katherine hesitated. This was hardly an ideal time for the conversation she needed to have. But before she could decide whether to wait, Jacob himself appeared in the foyer, drawn by their voices. "Katherine, where have you been?" His tone was sharp, his appearance disheveled, unusual for a man typically so fastidious. Behind him stood a tall man wearing a sheriff's badge. "I apologize for my absence. I was caught in the storm and took shelter." It wasn't a lie, merely an omission. "I see you've had troubles of your own." Jacob's expression remained hard. "Indeed, 3 men tried to make off with my cattle. We tracked them, recovered the herd. 1 rustler dead, 2 in custody." The sheriff stepped forward. "Madam, Sheriff Thomas Mills, I'll need to be heading back to town with the prisoners. Mr. Newell will continue our discussion later." After the sheriff departed, Jacob turned his full attention to Katherine. "You still haven't explained where exactly you took shelter. Mrs. Rivera says you borrowed Morgan's gelding." Katherine steeled herself. "Perhaps we could speak privately, Mr. Newell." Something in her tone must have alerted him to the seriousness of the conversation to come. His expression closed further, but he nodded toward his study. "Very well." The room was masculine and formal, leather-bound books lining the walls, a massive desk dominating the space, hunting trophies mounted above the fireplace. Katherine remained standing as Jacob closed the door behind them. "I'm afraid I must withdraw from our arrangement," she said directly, seeing no benefit in prolonging the inevitable. "I cannot in good conscience marry you when my heart is engaged elsewhere." Jacob stared at her, shock giving way quickly to anger. "Elsewhere? You've been here barely 2 weeks." "What nonsense is this?" "It is not nonsense, though I understand why it must seem so to you." Katherine met his gaze steadily. "During my illness, I came to know Jesse North. I didn't plan or expect to develop feelings for him, but I have. Deep feelings that I cannot ignore or set aside." North. Jacob practically spat the name. "I might have known. The man has coveted what's mine since he arrived in this territory." "I am not yours, Mr. Newell," Katherine said quietly but firmly. "I was never property to be claimed or transferred. I came here of my own free will, and I leave the same way. After I paid for your passage, after I welcomed you into my home, introduced you to my acquaintances as my future wife." Jacob's face flushed with anger. "Do you have any idea of the embarrassment this will cause?" "I am truly sorry for any discomfort my decision brings you. I will, of course, repay the cost of my passage as soon as I am able." Katherine maintained her composure with effort. "But surely even you must see that a marriage entered into without genuine affection would be a grave mistake for us both." Jacob moved to the window, his back rigid. "And you believe you found this genuine affection with North? A man who lives hand to mouth breeding horses, who has nothing to offer but a one-room cabin and pretty words. He offers himself his heart, his honesty, his true companionship." Katherine's voice softened. "Those are things of far greater value than land or cattle, Mr. Newell." He turned back to her, his anger seeming to deflate somewhat. "You're a fool, Katherine Palmer. A romantic fool who will regret this decision when winter comes and North's cabin is freezing when you're working your fingers raw just to survive. Perhaps, but it will be my choice, my life. Katherine moved toward the door. I've collected my belongings. I won't trespass on your hospitality any longer. He won't make you happy. There was something almost plaintive in Jacob's tone now. Men like North, they burn bright, but they burn out. I could have given you constancy, security. I believe he will make me happy, but more importantly, I believe we will find happiness together. Katherine paused, hand on the doorknob. I wish the same for you, Mr. Newell, truly. Perhaps someday you'll find a woman who values security above all else, who will appreciate all you have to offer. He gave a short, bitter laugh. Get out, Miss Palmer. Before I forget, I was raised a gentleman. Katherine left without another word, hurrying to the front door where her borrowed gelding waited, already saddled. Mrs. Rivera stood on the porch, understanding in her eyes. I put fresh bread and preserves in your bag, the housekeeper said quietly, and I'll pray for your happiness, child. Thank you, Katherine was touched by the unexpected kindness. For everything. The ride back to the boundary fence seemed shorter, Katherine's heart lighter despite the difficult conversation behind her. Jesse straightened in his saddle as she approached, relief evident in his posture. How did he take it? He asked as she reached him, about as well as could be expected. Katherine attempted a smile. He thinks I'm a fool. Are you having second thoughts? Jesse's voice was gentle, free of accusation, not one. Katherine reached across the space between their horses to take his hand. Take me home, Jesse. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. I thought you'd never ask. Word spread quickly through Whitetail Ridge about the mail-order bride who had jilted the territory's wealthiest rancher for the reclusive horse breeder. Speculation ran rampant, with theories ranging from the romantic to the scandalous. Katherine and Jesse ignored the gossip, focused instead on building their life together. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony performed by Reverend Mills in the small church in town. Katherine wore a dress of pale blue cotton with wildflowers in her hair that Jesse had gathered that morning. Their only attendants were Tommy, the boy who had first met Katherine at the stagecoach, and Sarah Mills, the Reverend's daughter. The community's reaction to their marriage was mixed. Some, like Mrs. Wilkins from the boarding house, attended the ceremony with genuine good wishes. Others stayed away, unwilling to risk Jacob Newell's displeasure. Jesse seemed unbothered by the divided response. All that matters is that we've chosen each other, he told Katherine on their wedding night as they stood together on the porch of what was now their shared home. The rest will sort itself out in time, and gradually it did. Katherine proved herself adept at homesteading life, applying the domestic skills she had learned from her mother to their simple household. She learned to garden, to preserve vegetables for winter, to make soap from rendered fat and lye. Jesse taught her to ride properly, and soon she was accompanying him on his rounds to check fences and monitor the horses. The horse breeding business flourished under their combined efforts. Jesse's expertise with bloodlines and training paired well with Katherine's unexpected talent for record-keeping and correspondence with potential buyers. When a wealthy rancher from Colorado purchased 2 of their yearlings for a record price, they celebrated by ordering glass windows for the cabin and planning in addition a proper parlor, and eventually, they hoped, a nursery. Jacob Newell made good on his threat to cut Jesse's access to the creek that ran through both their properties, damming it on his land. But Jesse, anticipating the move, had already dug a well and constructed a series of rainwater catchments that kept their homestead supplied. When Jacob then attempted to block the trail that provided the shortest route to town, the county commissioner, whose daughter's life Jesse had once saved during a difficult childbirth, ruled in favor of maintaining the public access. He'll tire of this eventually, Jesse predicted as they worked together to reinforce the corral. Newell's not a man who wastes energy on lost causes. Katherine wasn't so certain, but she kept her doubts to herself. Jacob's bitterness seemed to have calcified into something harder and more enduring than either of them had anticipated. She occasionally saw him in town, where he made a point of looking through her as if she were invisible. Summer gave way to autumn, and with the changing season came news that delighted them both. Katherine was expecting a child, due in the late spring. Jesse's reaction to the announcement was everything she could have hoped for, joy mingled with tender concern, his hands gentle as they cradled her still flat stomach. "A baby," he whispered, awe in his voice. "Our baby." Katherine saw the shadow of old grief pass briefly across his face. "Are you afraid?" she asked softly, knowing the loss he had suffered. "Yes," he admitted, "but not enough to dim my happiness. Life offers no guarantees, Katherine. We both know that better than most. All we can do is love fully while we have the chance." As winter settled over the valley, bringing snow that transformed the landscape into a pristine wonderland, Katherine found herself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this place, this life, this man. The mail-order bride with fever, nursed back to health by a cowboy who had lost his faith in happiness, both of them finding unexpected redemption in each other's arms. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Jesse reading aloud from a new medical journal while Katherine mended a shirt, a knock at the door startled them both. Visitors were rare in good weather, almost unheard of in winter. Jesse set aside his journal and moved to the door, hand resting cautiously on the pistol he kept nearby. "Who's there?" "Sheriff Mills," came the reply. "And I've got Jacob Newell with me. He's hurt bad." Katherine exchanged a startled glance with Jesse before he opened the door. The sheriff stood on the porch, supporting a barely conscious Jacob, whose coat was dark with what could only be blood. "What happened?" Jesse asked, immediately helping to bring the injured man inside. "Ambush on the road from Byers Junction," Mills explained as they lowered Jacob onto the bed in the spare room, what had once been Sarah's room, now prepared for guests though rarely used. "Looks like the brother of that rustler we shot back in spring. Caught Newell alone, shot him twice before riding off. I found him about a mile from here. Couldn't make it to town in this weather, and your place was closest." Jesse was already examining Jacob's wounds, one to the shoulder, another more concerning one to the abdomen. "Katherine, I need hot water, clean cloths, my medical kit from the top shelf, and the whiskey." She moved quickly, gathering the requested items while Jesse cut away Jacob's bloodied clothing. The injured man's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Jesse's face. "North," he rasped. "Ironic. Save your strength," Jesse advised, accepting the supplies Katherine brought. "You've lost a lot of blood. Dying man can speak if he wants." Jacob's breathing was labored, his complexion alarmingly gray. "You're not dying on my watch," Jesse said firmly, pouring whiskey over his hands before probing the abdominal wound. "Not if I can help it." What followed was a tense, grueling night. Jesse worked with the focus and skill of the doctor he had trained to be, extracting the bullet from Jacob's abdomen, cleaning and suturing both wounds. Katherine assisted as best she could, holding lanterns steady, preparing poultices, boiling more water when needed. Sheriff Mills rode back to town to inform Newell's ranch hands of their employer's situation and to send word to the nearest proper doctor, though in the current weather, help wouldn't arrive for days. Dawn was breaking when Jesse finally straightened, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. "I've done what I can, the rest is up to him, and God if he's listening." Katherine led him from the sick room, insisting he rest. "You've done more than most would have, given the history between you." Jesse shook his head. "That doesn't matter, not when a man's life is at stake." They took turns sitting with Jacob throughout the day, monitoring his pulse and temperature, spooning broth between his lips when he was lucid enough to swallow. By nightfall, his fever had spiked dangerously, and Jesse prepared cold compresses to try to bring it down. "Just like you did for me," Katherine observed, helping to apply the damp cloths to Jacob's burning skin. "Similar, though your fever was different, pneumonia, not wound infection." Jesse's expression was grim. "The next 12 hours will tell." Through the night, they continued their vigil. Katherine dozed briefly in a chair, waking to find Jesse singing softly as he changed Jacob's bandages, the same low, comforting melody she half remembered from her own illness. You used to sing to me, she said, moving to his side. Did I? Jesse looked surprised. I didn't think you'd remember that, not clearly, but yes, she touched his arm gently. What is it? An old hymn my mother used to sing, about finding peace in troubled times. He shrugged, seeming embarrassed. It helps sometimes. To remember there might be something larger than our immediate struggles. By morning, Jacob's fever had broken. His breathing steadied, and when he opened his eyes, they were clear and focused for the first time since his arrival. Still here, then, he said hoarsely, looking up at Jesse. Not dead yet. Not from lack of trying, Jesse replied, checking the bandages, but the wounds are clean and you're stronger than you look. Jacob's gaze shifted to Katherine, who stood nearby with a cup of broth. Both of you taking care of me. Of course, she said simply, moving forward to help him drink. Jacob accepted a few sips before turning his face away. Why, after how I've treated you both? Jesse and Katherine exchanged a glance. It was Jesse who answered. Because it's the right thing to do. Because despite our differences, we're neighbors in a harsh land. Because someday it might be me bleeding by the roadside, and I'd hope someone would do the same. Jacob closed his eyes, a single tear escaping to track down his weathered cheek. Might have misjudged you, North. The following days established a routine. Jacob slowly regained strength, moving from broth to more substantial food, from complete bed rest to sitting up for short periods. Sheriff Mills returned with news that the would-be murderer had been captured crossing into Colorado Territory. The doctor from Byers Junction finally arrived, examined Jacob's wounds, and pronounced Jesse's treatment as fine as any I could have provided, maybe better. On the 5th day, when Jacob was strong enough to hold extended conversations, he asked to speak with both Jesse and Katherine together. They sat beside his bed, unsure what to expect. I've been a fool, Jacob began without preamble. A bitter, vengeful old fool. You were hurt, Katherine said gently. We understood that. Jacob shook his head. No excuses. What I've done trying to cut off your water, block your access to town, it was petty. Beneath me. He looked directly at Jesse. I respected your father, you know, bought my first breeding stock from him before you came west. He was an honorable man. Yes, he was, Jesse agreed, surprised by the mention of his father. When I saw how you lived, what you'd built here. Jacob gestured weakly at their surroundings. It reminded me of my early days in the territory, before success made me forget what matters. It's never too late to remember, Katherine said. Jacob's gaze moved to her, something like regret in his eyes. You were right to choose as you did, Katherine. I wouldn't have made you happy, wouldn't have known how. His attention returned to Jesse. The dam on the creek, I'll have my men dismantle it when I'm back on my feet, and the trail dispute, I'll withdraw my claim. That's generous of you, Jesse said carefully. Not generous, just right. Jacob's eyelids drooped with exhaustion. One more thing. That north pasture that adjoins your property, 100 acres or so, I want you to have it. Jesse stared in disbelief. Jacob, that land is worth. I know what it's worth. Consider it payment for saving my life, or a wedding gift long overdue. A ghost of a smile touched Jacob's lips. Your horses need room to run. Good grazing there. We can't possibly, Katherine began. Please, let an old man make amends in his own way. Jacob's voice was fading. Papers in my desk. Tell Mrs. Rivera she'll find them. After Jacob drifted into sleep, Jesse and Katherine retreated to the porch, both needing the crisp winter air to clear their thoughts. You think he means it? Katherine asked, her hand unconsciously resting on her growing belly. About the land, Jesse gazed out at the snow-covered valley. Yes, near death has a way of clarifying what matters. I've seen it before. It's an incredible gift. It is. Jesse put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. That land would secure our future, Katherine, our child's future. She leaned into his embrace, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she'd first boarded that stagecoach in Philadelphia. We've come so far from where we started. You, a mail-order bride with fever, Jesse murmured against her hair. Me, a broken man who'd lost faith in just about everything. Who could have predicted this? I think, perhaps, it was always meant to be. Katherine turned in his arms, reaching up to touch his beloved face. Everything that happened, my illness, your care, even Jacob's initial anger and now his change of heart, all of it leading us here to this moment." Jesse smiled, the happiness in his eyes now unclouded by old grief or doubt. "To this life we're building, together." As winter gave way to spring, new life flourished across the North homestead. The mare's filly, Hope, grew strong and spirited, already showing the Arabian bloodlines that would make her valuable. The addition to the cabin was completed a proper parlor with glass windows that filled the space with light, and a small nursery awaiting its occupant. On the north pasture, gifted as promised by a recovering Jacob Newell, Jesse's horses grazed contentedly, their numbers growing as the breeding program flourished. And in early May, when the wildflowers carpeted the valley in a riot of color, Katherine gave birth to a daughter. They named her Faith, Sarah North Faith, for the belief in possibilities that had brought them together. Sarah in honor of the woman whose memory Jesse would always carry with quiet dignity. On a warm evening in June, they sat together on the porch, Katherine nursing their infant daughter while Jesse worked on plans for a proper schoolhouse in Whitetail Ridge, a project he had agreed to oversee at the town council's request. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, casting long shadows across the land that was now undeniably home. "Happy?" Jesse asked, looking up from his papers to watch his wife and daughter, his expression one of quiet wonder. Katherine smiled, shifting the baby to her shoulder. "Completely, are you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He set aside his work and moved to join them, one hand gently cradling his daughter's tiny head. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that you chose me, that we have this beautiful child, this life. Believe it." Katherine leaned against him, her heart full to bursting. "This is only the beginning, Jesse. We have so many years ahead, so many joys to discover, so many dreams to build." As darkness settled over the valley, stars emerging one by one in the vast Wyoming sky, the little family remained on the porch, wrapped in the certainty of a love that had begun in the most unlikely circumstances, but had proven stronger than illness, stronger than adversity, stronger even than the doubts and fears they had both carried for so long. The mail-order bride with fever, the cowboy who'd lost faith healed now, whole now, together now. Forever.